uh, for a really nice pool date, actually. We played pool, and she turned out to be a pool shark. She beat the crap out of me. And I then went and took some lessons and got to where I could play with her. We hit it off pretty well. She's a physician, she's a pediatrician. At that time, I was doing applied mathematics in the oil industry. We had a lot in common, and we dated for about a year and then decided to get married.
And would you say, like, looking back, was there any way that you could have predicted what was to happen later? Just because younger guys might watch this and want to know if, there was something that you could have seen coming just in hindsight.
Um, there was nothing really prior to the marriage, but there were some things immediately after the marriage that surprised me. I think for young men, the lesson from my story is simply don't enter the family court system.
Mhm.
You have to stay out of it completely. Um, there were tiny red flags. Her daughters, basically, from what I could tell, she had two daughters.
Mhm.
From what I could tell, they basically had no interaction with men their entire lives by the time I met them at 10 years old. I remember her eldest daughter being absolutely amazed that I could outrun her. She was a very fast runner in school and could outrun all the boys. And she was just surprised that I won all the games and everything. And finally, my ex-wife, she just turned to her and said, "Don't you know that boys win everything? Don't you know that?" And she didn't. There was also a tendency, and I noticed this before we were married. She had a daughter that she had adopted. Now, there's a story there that I found out quite different once I was in the marriage, but I thought, she has an adopted daughter. It's a very Christian thing to adopt orphans, so I
Mhm.
was not opposed to that. And it seemed like she picked a winner child and a loser child.
Mhm.
So the child that was hers, um, she said, was always the better child. And basically, dinners would be like, here's why child one is so much better than child two. And it was really humiliating to the other little girl. And that's actually one of the first things I put a stop to when we got married.
So, when was the first time you noticed something changed, or like when did you first notice that your son might be in trouble?
Right around, well, I noticed a big change in my ex-wife 6 months to a year after the pregnancy. She said she was in a postpartum depression, but it wasn't that. It was pretty clear to me it wasn't that. She began to, like, I caught her pulling pieces of paper out of the trash, like mail that was directed to me, and I threw it in the trash. She started pulling things out of the trash and keeping them. And finally, she started putting my son into timeout, saying things like, "Don't be a boy. The monsters only eat boys." Because my son was saying he's afraid of monsters. And so when I started putting my foot down about that kind of stuff, that's when she filed for divorce. Um, I think I think basically I was a sperm donor that would pay child support. That's basically what I think it was a setup from the get go.
And how old was your son when this happened?
She started at 2.5. If your audience goes out onto YouTube, you can search for "Mommy Says I'm a Girl," and that video just went all over the world. And it was just my son just passed his third birthday. It's the first iPhone video I ever took, and it's my son telling me that his mom is saying that he's a girl, and he believes her.
And were you guys together at this point or were you separated?
At 3, we were separated. I had just moved out of the house a mile away because she, being a doctor, used primary care providers that she had relationships with to
Mhm.
force me out of the house. Her daughters suddenly became, quote, depressed.
Mhm.
And so it forced me out of the house.
And this was in Texas is where the case started?
Capel, Texas. Yeah. And that's another thing. So Capel sits across the border of two counties, Denton County and Dallas County. If we had gone to trial in Denton County, she would have definitely lost custody. She might actually have been arrested.
Mhm.
But we went to trial in Dallas County because she convinced me to move from one house to another that was just across the county line. And then she filed for divorce when we were in that county.
And that county was more liberal?
Dallas County is as liberal as Los Angeles. Yeah.
Okay, because there's this idea that in conservative states, fathers will have more rights and the laws are getting more fair. So would you say that's not the case?
It's not the case, and it's actually probably the opposite in many cases. Feminists believe that men should take a larger share of child rearing duties. So it's actually in leftist states that fathers get more custody than in the conservative states. Conservative states are usually the every other weekend father, the 8 days a month.
So when did you stop getting regular access to your son? When did that start? And what was that process like?
It happened after the first divorce. So, excuse me. So the way it worked is, because I've been to court 3 times for, this is another problem with family court. The cases aren't like a normal, civil case. You get a ruling and you're done, right? That's absolutely not the case in family court. In family court, the cases drag on forever. So in my initial divorce case, the very first one that happened in 2016, I was given what's called the standard possession schedule in Texas. And that's the, 26% of the time. Why is that? It's because there's a guy named Blake Mitchell. I like to name names of these people. Truth is an absolute defense against defamation, I've learned over the years. So the custody evaluator's name is Blake Mitchell. He's a psychologist that works out of Denton, Dallas, and Collin counties here in Texas. And he asked me what my number one issue was in this divorce. And I said, my wife is tampering with my son's gender identity. He did a 1-year investigation and concluded that I was making all that up and that I had made a false accusation against her. And on the basis of making this false accusation, they gave me less than the standard possession schedule at first.
And
which shows you how if you look at what's happened to my son and they accuse me of making a false accusation, it goes to show you the power of women in family court. They can simply lie about anything.
But how is that, if there was video evidence of her doing it, how did they get away with saying that you were lying if it's on video?
Yeah, it's a good point. So, and not only is there a video, but I have email records showing that I gave that video to the custody evaluator, Blake Mitchell. Okay. He simply didn't put it into his report. And when I attempted to introduce it into evidence in family court, they wouldn't let me introduce it. So the judge never had to consider it.
Oh, so they literally.
That's what they do in family court. They limit what evidence can be presented to create a narrative that they want.
Okay. So you got your custody limited at that point. So what happened next? Was it further limited or?
Nope.
Okay.
So I kept that standard possession schedule until 2019 when I was given 50-50 custody and equal parental rights and a check on all medical procedures and no child support. During that interim period, she began to really ramp up transitioning my son to the point where I would take my son to school as a boy. And this is Pinkerton Middle School in Capel, Texas, which is closed now. I believe this is the reason they closed the school. I think they moved the principal on and shut it down. They were transitioning my son secretly behind my back. I would bring my son to school in boys' clothes from my house, and the teacher had a dress that my ex-wife had given the teacher. They would change my son into a dress and make him use the girls' restroom. I found this out after about 1 year and 3 months, and I filed a grievance with the Capel School District. And of course, they exonerated themselves and said they had done nothing wrong, that under their nickname policy, they could call James whatever they wanted. And they had a policy to let children wear whatever clothes they wanted based on what parents gave them. So it was a really traumatic thing for me. And that's what led to the next trial in 2019.
And how old was your son during this?
That's first and second grade.
Wow. So you would drop off your first and second grade son at school and he would come back to you wearing a dress.
Actually, they would change him back into boys' clothes and give him back to me in boys' clothes so that I wouldn't know. And Pearl, here's something really important for your audience to know. And one of the things I so love about your show is that you're fearless in telling the truth about these things that other people will not talk about. This is something that has really shocked me. I've checked in all 50 states. Doctors, psychologists, and psychiatrists, all of them have the right to exert privacy for the child against the parents. So this is how schools are doing this transitioning secretly behind parents' backs. The school counselor or the school nurse will exert a right of privacy for the child against the parent, and there's no notification requirement. The care provider does not have to notify the parent that they exerted this right of privacy, and then they can treat your child and do whatever they want with your child in secret. It's really important. If you do have kids, you must never leave your children alone with a care provider. And basically that means you can't take your kid to a public school because they have counselors and nurses there that can do this legally. It was legal for the school to do this because the school counselor was doing it.
So there's a law in every state in this country where legally they can start to transition your kid and hide it from you.
That's right.
Because
that's
it's
why if you go to a well visit with a child, like to your pediatrician, they'll ask you to step outside.
No way.
Oh, yes, they do. And they have a right to have private conversations. So that's why you can't ever leave your children alone with these people.
Yeah, it's the same thing with birth control, isn't it? Where they can put your daughter on birth control at a young age and not tell you.
It's through these privacy laws they're allowed to do that.
Yeah.
And the intent was benevolent for creating these laws. The intent was, well, if there's some abuse the child's talking about, you don't want to tell the parent, which might cause more abuse. That was the idea. So what I've proposed as a change to the law in Texas, where I live, is that, okay, you can exert the right of privacy, but the care provider has to tell you within 15 days that they have at least exerted it. So you can go to court and find out what's going on.
Okay. So you drop your kid off, your son off at school, and he's getting transitioned, and they bring him back to you in boy clothes. At the same time, you have 50-50 custody, and they drop child support. Now you're brought back to court.
Yeah, well, during that period when they were transitioning him, I had the standard possession schedule in Texas, which is 27% of the time. So I would pick him up from school on Monday, and I would drop him off on Fridays. So I began to challenge the school, and I began to publicly campaign for a law in Texas to outlaw transitioning children, both chemically and surgically. It took me 6 years and about $200,000 of my own money to do that, but I finally did accomplish it. It happened right after the 2019 trial. And so I was actively campaigning in Texas for that. And I also ran for office in the state of Texas on that platform of making that illegal. So what happened in the 2019 trial is she just constantly finds pretexts to say there's been a complete change in circumstances. And so she said, well, the change in circumstances is James wants to be a girl. Well, the thing is, James may have presented as a girl with my ex-wife, but with me, he's always presented as a boy, perfectly happy as a boy. Everybody at the boxing gym knows him as James and as a boy. I mean, he's a very talented boxer. I mean, Olympic talent scouts were looking at him. He's like literally that good. He's a very, very athletic young man. And so he never presented consistently as a girl. And I think what the transgender community latched onto my case for is because the idea, I think, was this kid doesn't present consistently. So if you can get him, you can get any kid. And so we go to this 2019 trial. The issue is about the transition. We had to endure another, custody evaluator. And this guy actually recommended that my son be transitioned. And I had to bring in experts, against this stuff. And the guy that I brought in was Dr. Levine, and he ran the first gender clinic in the United States at Johns Hopkins University. And they shut their clinic down after 4.5 years because their data showed they were hurting patients. So we knew this back in the 70s, that this stuff doesn't work. So he came in and totally demolished the expert and the custody evaluator. The judge completely disregarded the custody evaluator because he recommended transition of my son, but with a mistaken understanding of even what the psychological diagnosis was. He misdiagnosed my son, and we proved it. Johanna Olson Kennedy was their expert on their side. She runs the largest gender clinic in America, the gender clinic my son's in right now. And in 2019, I put her under a deposition. I asked her a very simple question about 15 minutes into the deposition. I said, what is your medical justification for amputating healthy body parts from children? She said directly, without skipping a beat, she said, if they cause psychological distress, they're not healthy body parts and we can remove them. Opposing counsel literally dropped her notebook and left the deposition, had somebody else come in to finish it. And they were not going to put her in front of a Texas jury. So they dropped her as an expert. So we demolished them. I got 50-50 custody, no child support. Then the judges in Dallas County moved my case, sua sponte, moved my case into the 301st District Court with Judge Bloody Mary Brown. I call her Bloody Mary Brown. Bloody Mary Brown then systematically, using temporary orders, which are not appealable in the state of Texas. That's important because I was never able to go up to get them corrected. She used temporary orders to strip me of all parental rights and eventually put me on supervised visitation. Because I was running for political office and I was talking about my case as part of my political platform to get this law changed. And she took my children from me and gave me supervised visitation because I ran for office as a Republican and tried to get the law changed.
Wait, under temporary orders?
Yeah, a lot of people, you ask you focus on exactly the right things that most people overlook. So in civil cases, and you can do this in criminal cases too, but it's mostly done in civil cases. You can imagine, let's say it's a contract dispute over who owns some piece of property or something. Maybe it's a crane or something. Temporary orders can be issued so that one person who maybe is in possession of the crane can't damage it, so that the other person couldn't recover it if they won the lawsuit. It's designed to maintain the status quo so nobody loses any property or money while we're going to trial. Does that make sense? So temporary orders in family court, however, are quite different. Because in a civil trial, once the verdict comes in, that's it, you're done. That's one of the great things about the American system. Once the ruling's in, even if you don't like it, you're done and you don't have to deal with it anymore. You've got a verdict, you're finished. People can just move on with their lives. In family court, these things come up over and over again. So in practice, people live under temporary orders for the entire duration of the time they're raising their kids. In my case, these temporary orders removed physical custody from me. So I was not able to be with my children unless I affirmed that James was a girl and allowed him to wear a dress to the visitations.
How did she, it doesn't sound like you were in court. So how did she implement the way you're telling the story? I'm understanding that you weren't in court when she issued these orders. Oh, you were. Okay.
Yeah, I've been in court continuously for 10 years, except for 2 3-week periods. She's continuously sued me in court for 10 years.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
so
we're in Judge Bloody Mary Brown's court now. Yeah.
Okay. So you got 50-50 custody and then they switched districts and then, now I understand.
And this judge never implemented the order and instead stripped me of all my parental rights.
Oh, so you spent all that time and then you won and you thought, in a way, it looked better. And then they just switched your district because you were running for office and you were trying to get the law changed and they didn't. Is this her? I looked her up online. Could you show my screen for a second? Does she have gray hair?
I can't see, unfortunately. Yes, that's her.
Oh, that's her. Okay, I was just wondering.
Yes.
Wow. I have an opinion, but I can't say it on YouTube about women being judges, but That's hate speech, so I
Yeah.
won't say it.
Yeah. Most
Okay.
family court judges are women.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so she just strips, and does she do that, like, do you get to plead your case in court, or does she just do it, like, off the back, or she
Nope,
issues
we
this?
had hearings for all this. That's why I call myself a jailhouse lawyer, because I don't need lawyers anymore, because I've been in court for 3 or 4 times a month for 10 years, and you eventually learn the law, even if you're a dumb old mathematician like me. So she held hearings, all right, but um, in 3.5 years in her court, she never sustained a single objection, never allowed me to testify, and never allowed my experts to testify. So she limited the evidence that the court has available so that she can make her rulings the way she wants. That's how it works in family court.
So she limited the evidence so she could make the rulings that she wanted.
That's right. Yeah. My doctors never got to testify. I never got to testify. I was never able to bring evidence forward. They did not. My child actually made an outcry at one of the court-ordered counseling sessions, and he said, "I'm embarrassed to wear dresses, and I don't want to be a girl." The counselor threw my son out of the session, and it instigated a CPS investigation of me for that. So all of that, all of those records, I was never able to present them in court because the judge would not admit them.
Okay. And did you have a jury trial? Because isn't in Texas is like one of the only states, I think, that offer jury trials for family court.
Yes.
Am I wrong or right about that?
No, that's right. I had a jury trial in 2019. Yeah.
Okay. And so were you not able to have a jury trial next?
Yeah, because in California, they do not allow, Texas is the only place where you can have a jury trial. Yeah.
But Mary Brown, isn't she? I'm looking, it says Texas, no? So how did it get to
Yes.
California?
Yeah. So we never had a final trial with Mary Brown. Mary Brown was issuing temporary orders as we moved to the final trial. And it was all set up to allow my ex-wife to move to California. And they set me up to have supervised visitation in Texas before she moved. So the next temporary order, after I got supervised visitation, the next temporary order expanded the residency restriction so that she could move to California. And then she did. And then I went to the Texas Supreme Court.
Oh, so now, okay, so now she's allowed to move before you can even get to a jury trial.
Correct.
Okay. And what did the Texas Supreme Court tell you?
So the Texas Supreme Court, Justice Blacklock, I call him Black-Hearted Blacklock.
Justin Blacklock. What's his name?
Sorry,
say that one more time. Justin what?
Justice Blacklock.
Blacklock. I just like to have faces. Okay.
He ruled that they could not stop her from moving to California, even though California had just passed its transgender kidnapping law, saying that she was no more likely to transition my son in California than in Texas. That's what a political ruling looks like.
And is that because he's running for office and it'll piss people off if he says, is that like, why on earth would he rule that?
Why on earth? Yeah. So you have the right response. So a lot of people, even in Texas, a lot of Republicans here do not understand the fundamental issue with the Republican Party. And it's actually national, but it shows itself very clearly in Texas. Fundamentally, what the problem is this: the donor class of the Republican Party is far left. So I'll give you an example. The transgender movement in the United States was not started by Democrats. It was started by Republicans. And I'm a lifelong Republican. I learned all this the hard way. Paul Singer is the largest donor to the Republican Party. And he founded the Human Rights Campaign. You know the yellow equal sign?
I don't, but that sounds familiar, but let me see.
Okay, the Human Rights Campaign is the largest and most powerful LGBT lobby organization in the world. It's the reason that the State Department put the pride flags on all our embassies worldwide. They are also the people that created the DEI scores for hiring LGBT people. and then they grade corporations on it and that corporations live up to. That was founded by Paul Singer, who is the largest donor to the Republican Party. He also sues everybody. He's very litigious. And Paul Singer also funds the Manhattan Institute. He funds the Claremont Review of Books. He's a big funder of think tanks and so forth. I mean, you can see interviews that Manhattan Institute fellows have done with him where they talk about his LGBT advocacy. He started the transgender movement in the United States, and basically with the idea of codifying it into law. He's the largest donor to the Republican Party, and all these people in office receive money from him. And so you have this problem. You've got elected officials that are beholden to a far left donor class.
And he's worth $6 billion. I mean, who's got that? Like, that's a
Yeah,
lot of money.
he's a hedge fund billionaire.
How are you going to compete with that? I don't have
Exactly.
$6 billion. I don't know about you.
So imagine you're an elected official in a state office in Texas or in the federal government. You have a liberal donor class that you have to please to get the money to get reelected, but you're getting elected from an electorate like in Texas that's far right. Mm-hmm. So how do you solve that problem? Well, one of the easiest ways to solve the problem is you don't ever bring up votes on controversial issues that affect your donors. That's the first thing they tried with me for 6 years. Mm-hmm. But I forced them to have a vote on the issue. And I made a lot of political enemies in the Republican Party along the way because they did not want to take a vote on this issue, public vote. So I forced them to take a public vote. I wrote a bill. They substantially passed that bill, but they took 3 sentences out of it. And so this is the second tactic that they use. They don't vote on bills, but if they have to vote on bills, they put loopholes in the bills so they don't have any effect. And basically, they can go to their donor class and say, I left those loopholes for you, give me some money. They can go to the electorate and say, did you see how conservative I was when I passed that bill? So what they did with my bill, there were 3 sentences they took out, which would have classified chemical and surgical castration of children as felony child sexual abuse. Mm-hmm. And in Texas, that'll get you a mandatory life in prison. And our prisons are pretty bad. So it would be an extremely powerful deterrent. They removed those so that parents could fly their children to Colorado or California and just get these procedures done and fly back to Texas. So it had absolutely no effect. And that's what the donors wanted as a fallback. And that's the game that gets played all the time in Republican politics.
And what's the donors' incentive? Why do they, what's their, is it just because they believe in it, or is there some money incentive for them?
I think it has to do with social beliefs primarily. Okay. And longer term globalist aspirations, which if I had to explain it, I would do it this way. I'm actually writing a book about this. So I've lived all over the world. Okay. I've lived in 11 countries. There's only one place in the world that believes in free speech and gun rights and the right to remain silent. All these rights that we take for granted, there's just literally only one place in the world. If you go to the UK, they don't believe in free speech there.
Yeah.
Canada affirmatively says free speech is evil. They don't believe in it. Yeah. They don't have gun rights. The UK doesn't have gun rights. Mm-hmm. Germany doesn't have gun rights. Nobody has any of these things. And in America, not everybody believes in these things either. Our rich elites don't believe in free speech. That's why they censored you on YouTube. Mm-hmm. Okay. Because our rich elites don't believe in free speech. Mm-hmm. They don't believe in gun rights. Likewise, our lower classes in the United States, because they're beholden to government welfare, do whatever the bureaucrats want. And they're also in favor of all of these sort of liberal approaches of limiting speech, no gun rights, et cetera. It's really just the American middle class that believes in all these fundamental rights. And because the American middle class is responsible for electing the officers of the federal government, they have an outsized influence on world affairs. And I think there's been a globalist attempt for a long time to disrupt the families and financial standing of the American middle class to reduce its political power in order to obtain the ability to censor globally and to take away people's gun rights globally and so forth.
Okay, so their belief essentially, like, so this is just stuff they believe in and that's their incentive. They're not
Yes.
necessarily making money off of it.
Well, the hospitals make tons of money. So every child that's transitioned is about a $4.5 million lifetime income stream.
Wow.
And that's a result of federal money. It's not an innate result. Yeah, the puberty blocker drugs are among the most expensive drugs sold in the world.
Mhm. Okay.
So they have to stay on these hormones for the rest of their life, and they don't really get new genitals. They get a wound.
Mhm.
It's a wound that looks like genitals, but it requires the same wound care that you would if you were shot or if you were cut. And that wound care is a lifetime. So they make tons of money from these kids.
Yeah, I've interviewed some after, like, they've had it and they, like, I've interviewed some detransitions, and some of the stuff
Yeah.
they said I could barely listen to. It's pretty graphic.
Yes.
I'm even, like, clenching up thinking, okay, so what happens? So your wife then, or your ex-wife then moves to California.
Mm-hmm.
And
Uh-huh.
does that take us to the most recent court hearing, or was there one before that?
There's one before that. I went up to the Texas Supreme Court and argued that it would remove the protections of Texas law and subject my child to procedures which in Texas are child abuse. They ruled against me. Then I wind up in court with Judge Uhas, Department 64 in Los Angeles County. And that's when we got to the current trial.
Okay. And that current trial is in California.
Correct.
Okay. So then take me to what happened there. At this point, how long has it been since? Were you seeing your son in the meantime, or was it supervised visits still?
So it's supervised visits. She moved to California. I have to fly to California, get a hotel, do a visit in LA County. Cost me about $2,000 a visit. I did 2 visits. They were awful. I determined at that time that supervised visits are not in my child's best interests, and I won't do them anymore. At the supervised visits, they were forcing me to affirm my son was a girl. They were scolding me in front of my children. I was unable to just go to a park and throw a ball with my boys. Couldn't take them out for an ice cream. We were basically sitting in a room with bare white walls for 2 hours, and it was not pleasant for the boys or for me. So that's my son Jude. Also, I have 2 sons, James and Jude. They're twins. Jude became quite fearful on the second visit. I think the supervised visits were intimidating for him. So I just determined that I'm not going to do them anymore. So I had 2 supervised visits in a 3.5-year period before I got the latest ruling. Other than that, I didn't see my kids. My ex-wife has denied me electronic communication, and that was against the court order. The current ruling from the judge is that he just agreed with her and said, okay, then you just don't get any unsupervised electronic communication.
And that's the new judge in California.
Yeah, Judge Uhas. Yeah, Mark Uhas.
Mark Uhas. How do you spell Uhas? EU?
Juhas.
I had that wrong. Okay. Okay, this guy. Wow. And so so you've had supervised visits, and they basically scare your children because they treat you like the enemy, essentially.
Oh yeah. The purpose of supervised visits is not to protect children. The purpose of supervised visits in family court is it's an infinitely malleable collection of facts that can create a narrative against the father. That's really just all they're used for. And they were actually used against me at trial. The 2 supervised visits I went to were actually used against me at trial in that fashion.
And do you believe all the members of family court have an idea of what's going on, or do they genuinely believe the mother?
I think the judges believe all the sides are lying. I don't think they pick based on anything other than money. Money and ideology is all they pick on. That's literally all judges care about. The facts actually don't much matter in family court.
Okay. And that's because of the preponderance of evidence. It's based on like a balance of probabilities and not reasonable doubt, right? That's the
Oh
reason the
yeah,
facts
it's
don't
the
matter.
lowest standard in the law.
Okay.
If it's just 50.001% in favor of one person, they win. And I will submit to you that you can interpret any evidence to get 50.0001%.
And in most states, it's up to the discretion of the judge. Other than from
Always.
I've only heard, but Texas, you can get a jury trial.
You can get a jury trial, but only on the issue of conservatorship, not possession and access. Yeah.
Really?
Yes. Yeah. A lot of people have that mistaken.
Okay, so when it comes to child, like how much you get to see your child, even in Texas with the jury, it doesn't really affect it. It's still up to the discretion of the judge.
Yes, 100% up to the judge. So is child support. It's completely up to the judge.
Okay, and so that was your most recent visit where they. So is it over now? How old's your son?
They're 12. This trial is over. She could sue me again
Mhm.
anytime. All she has to show is that there's been a significant change in circumstances. If James is chemically castrated and becomes feminized, she could claim that's a significant change in circumstances, and I'll be right back in court, and they'll probably try to terminate my parental rights or take the next step to keep me away from my kids.
And right now, all you have is supervised visits. Are you paying child support?
I quit paying child support about 6 months ago, and I'm not going to pay it anymore.
Okay. And is she pursuing you for, or like, does the court order that you pay it and you're just refusing?
Yes, I'm willfully refusing to pay child support, which is a criminal offense in Texas.
Okay. And so you could eventually potentially get thrown in jail over the child support.
Yeah, I'll probably go to prison. Yeah, probably.
Okay. And do you believe that she's actually going to go through with this procedure?
100%. She's already represented to the court that she is. Yeah.
Wow. And do you have any insight into how your son's doing? Has she brainwashed him at this point? Or,
Yes.
okay, so he's completely like brainwashed and
Yeah, he's the school he's going to is teaching him, that it's people can't call you by male pronouns or by your quote unquote dead name and all that stuff. He's bought into all that stuff.
So, from your point of view, is there anything that can really be done to fight this? Like what can the average person do to help your case or the cases maybe close to them?
The most important thing is to push at the state level to outlaw these procedures. If these procedures are outlawed, it just can't happen in your state. Now, it's important that you not let them water these laws down like they did in Texas, and you make sure that it's classified as a criminal offense, so you can't leave the state to go do it. The other thing is Trump's on the right track on this. Trump says he's going to decertify any hospital that does these procedures. Their federal hospital certification will be removed, and this needs to be done at the state level as well. Not only at the federal level, but at the state level. Hospitals that do this should not be certified as hospitals. You shouldn't be able to have a medical practice to do this. The other thing, as a wider issue, is just family court reform, because a court should have never had the power to do this to my children and to me in the first place. And so, overall family court reform, and I think I can state that very simply, Earl, is in this way. Unless under the criminal rules, which is beyond a reasonable doubt, unless under a criminal trial, a jury has found that you have abused your children or you abandoned your children, right? There's neglect and abuse. Those are the two sides of the spectrum. Everything in between is legitimate parenting. And the state should have no discretion to interfere with your parenting if there's been no criminal finding of abuse or neglect. And we need to take discretion away from these judges. They've just shown they can't use discretion wisely. But of course, as you know, we're up against Title 4D and the massive funding to the states. And that's what family courts really are. They're just funding vehicles. Texas gets $500 million a year from Title 4D. So, what I've proposed in Texas is that you're not going to get the state to give up $500 million.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, good luck.
So right. So what I proposed is that agencies that collect these funds can't use them. They have to go to other purposes and can't benefit those agencies, which reduces their incentive to collect them.
Wait, say that. Can you give me an example of how that would work?
Yeah. So the reason that family courts were created, they're actually an accounting mechanism so that state can prove that you paid the child support to get the matching dollars. Like the child support that I used to pay, the state would make about $21,000 a year from me. Okay. So because I'm paying the state to child support, they can account for every dollar and make sure they get paid. Okay, so the Texas Attorney General's office in Texas is the one that collects this money. They do all the grant applications and everything, so they get the money. Well, the point is that the Texas Attorney General's office should not be able to spend that money. It should have to go somewhere else. It should go to border enforcement or some other part of state funding to reduce the incentive for them to constantly, create more. Like people don't get that the reason the family courts always give the children to the dysfunctional parent. It's a very simple calculation on their part. I watched a mother who, after a year, was able to successfully pass a 30-day heroin drug test. She's a heroin addict. The father had custody and had been given custody a year before. I'm sitting there waiting to go into my hearing, and I'm listening to this one. And she passed this drug test finally after 3 failed ones. And the judge immediately gave the children back to the mom, the heroin addict.
Oh, it's got to be because the dysfunctional parent's never going to be able to pay.
That's right. Yeah, they'll never pay child support.
That woman's never going to hold a job if she's
correct,
barely passing drug tests.
Correct.
And then,
so the judges are incentivized to give the children to the dysfunctional parent.
But are the judges getting money out of this? They are in some
states. They are.
Yeah, it's like
some states.
Is it their retirement? It's something. Yeah.
Yeah. In some states, judicial retirement funds are tied to how much Title 4D funds that they bring in for the state. In Texas, the Texas Attorney General's office gives judges quotas before they ever hear cases. They're given a dollar quota for the year that they have to give in divorces. So that's why sometimes child support is way excessive. It's way high. It's because the judge has a quota that they have to fill.
And has making any of these names public, like, I'm just wondering, because, like, if I was in Texas, can you go visit these judges? They're elected officials, aren't they?
Oh, yeah. I can go to their courts anytime. Yeah.
So do people, because this got so much traction, do people, I don't know, call the judges about your case? Has this impacted that? Like, do they have any idea how much traction this has gotten, the case?
Oh, believe me, they do. Judge Bloody Mary Brown had a protest that broke out in front of her house.
No way.
Oh, yeah. And she lives in University Park in Texas. The phone calls to judges about specific cases are actually illegal. And my case caused all the courts in Texas to create reminders. Whenever you call the courts now, they have recorded messages telling you that it's a criminal offense to try to influence a judge on a specific case. So we need to probably change the laws to make it legal for people to let judges know if they're doing a bad job on a case. But right now, it's actually illegal to do that.
So was the protest in front of her house, was that illegal?
That was legal. However, University Park has a lot of public officials that live there, and they have a no specific protesting law. So you can't protest a specific house. So all they did is they marched up and down the sidewalk in front of her house, so it wasn't a specific house. Her Judge Bloody Mary Brown's husband came out and cussed out the protesters, used the F word, and created a big scene. Actually, it looks to me on the video like he assaulted one of them. I actually filed a recusal on that basis because They alleged that I led that protest, which I didn't, and that it constituted ex parte communication, the illegal kind that I'm talking about.
Mhm.
And that's alleged in the pleadings in Texas. So in Texas, if if a judge's spouse is a witness to any of the facts alleged in the pleading, they can't sit on the case. So she should have recused herself, but she didn't. So I went up. They brought in a judge emeritus who said she doesn't have to recuse herself. You can get the facts some other way. Totally illegal, but that's how it works in Texas.
And what about the other one, Blackrock or Blacklock, Justice
Mm-hmm.
Blacklock? Did people protest him? Did they?
No, no. I don't think people are even aware of what he's done. One of the things that our Supreme Court trades on is very low publicity campaigns. And so, but I assure you, in his next run for office, people will know. I will make sure of that.
When does he run?
It's got 2 years from now.
Okay. And oh, he's been the wow, okay.
He's a
So
total scumbag. He knew exactly what he was doing. He was working for the donor class and the other thing too is you got to understand, Pearl,
mhm.
I am a thorn in the side of the Republican establishment here. They did not want to pass that transgender law. They did not want, because look, when I passed that law,
Mhm.
it shut down $1 billion industry in Texas. It shut down all the gender clinics at children's hospitals in 4 major cities. So it was a major hit to the hospitals, which are a large donor class within the state. So they were really upset with me. One of the main reasons they let my ex-wife move to California is they wanted me to move there too, so I would leave the state and stop being a problem for them. So that's another thing that, people. I know some other examples of this besides me.
Mhm.
The former mayor of Mineral Wells, for example, the political establishments are using family court as a weapon against political enemies. They'll take their kids and bankrupt them, and they're also able to manufacture all kinds of fake domestic violence claims and all kinds of things,
Right.
which hurt them in reelection. So family court is being used as a political weapon. If you have an ex-wife and you run for office, you can be rest assured that your political enemies in the Republican Party will definitely go talk to your ex-wife.
Wow. So they'll talk to your ex-wife and get like a news story or something?
Well, they'll get her in Texas. The law firm of choice for this is Coons Fuller, and they'll get your ex-wife a law firm and sue you and manufacture a case against you to
Wait.
ruin your election.
Wait, say that one more time. Sorry. Say that. It's Coons
That's all right,
Fuller.
Don. They will get your ex-wife a lawyer with the most expensive and most powerful law firm in Texas to manufacture a case against you in family court, because they know the laws of evidence don't apply there. They can get any evidence in they want and create fake charges, domestic violence charges, and then ruin your campaign so you can't get elected.
No, I was there. I was at Coons Fuller like not very long ago.
Really?
Yeah, no, it's weird
Who'd you
because
talk to?
I don't
Jessica
I don't
Janasek?
no, I don't want to say the name on stream,
Oh,
but
you're not like me. You're not like me.
no, because he actually the guy I talked to won the biggest like case for a dad in Texas. So he was on like it's interesting you said that because the case that I saw like won one of the biggest like cases in Texas to give the dad
Coons Fuller
custody.
never loses. Yeah.
Yeah,
Coons Fuller never loses. They're the
but
largest donor to judicial campaigns in the state of Texas. They buy judges.
oh wow.
They never lose. They never lose.
So
Their retainers are enormous. The retainer for Coons Fuller is like $175,000.
wow. Okay. So but they run wow, that's crazy. So they fund the whoever like the judges campaigns.
Yes, they do. Yeah.
And then they get your ex-wife to could you say
Yes.
sorry, say that one more time. They get your ex-wife to what?
They'll use your ex-wife and take you into hearings and create trumped up facts and charges that create a court record that's very damaging that will be used against you when you run for office.
Wow. That's
It's
so
exactly what they did to me, actually.
that's so
I'll give you an
that's
example
so
in my
shocking
case.
because I really liked the guy that I met with there. Like, I'm actually so shocked.
Actually, I liked my opposing counsel in my case, Jessica
Yeah.
Jasic. She's a very nice lady. Um, but Coons Fuller was a platinum sponsor of my judge's political campaign. Do you think I could get a fair trial there? Absolutely not.
No. Yeah, of
They gave her
course not.
tens of thousands of dollars. And that's perfectly legal in all the 50 states.
Really? So the law firms give the judges money to run, and the judges
Correct.
essentially, oh, so they have to let them win. And essentially,
Correct.
because women generally, I'm sure that's their biggest client is women. So
100%.
yeah, so obviously because women file first more. So
Right.
if that happens, then okay, that makes sense. Then of course you're gonna rule that way.
Yeah. And let me give you an example of how it works. In my 2019 trial, when I got 50-50 custody, Jessica Janicek from Coons Fuller, she was shocked. She fell out of her chair when I got 50-50 custody from this judge. It was Judge Kim Cooks in the 255th District Court. Coons Fuller, out of retribution, I believe, put in money against her opponent the next time she ran for office, and they took Kim Cooks off the bench.
Jessica Janicek.
Mhm.
I'm trying to think. I don't think I met her. I'm trying to see her name. Jessica Coons Fuller. Wait, how do you spell Janicek? J-A.
And I have to look at my emails.
That's okay. I was just curious. Jan. I'm going to put Coons Fuller, see if it comes up. Oh, there it is.
Super nice lady.
Yeah. No, I didn't meet her. I don't know who that is.
Okay.
But wow, that's crazy. So essentially, how is that legal?
Well, okay, it's a good question. So here's how it's legal, because it wouldn't be legal in any other industry, right? It couldn't be. It's legal because the Bar Association, it has a very special status in America. It's a private organization that is granted the legal status to essentially manage a discipline for state governments. In California, it's gone so far that they have actually ruled that the Bar Association, a private company, the Bar Association, has sovereign immunity, just like the state government. You can't sue it. So the bar associations are super powerful, and they are the ones most responsible for legislation that allows this stuff to happen. They want to be able to buy cases when they need to win. So they pass laws that let them do it.
Wow.
There's literally no organization in America that's probably as powerful as the Bar Association. And if you look at members of the bar in the state governments and the federal governments, prosecutors and judges are the most powerful lobby groups within the Bar Association, especially prosecutors. And the reason is very simple. I don't think people understand this either. Prosecutors and judges, like family court judges, have absolute immunity, meaning that even if you can prove that they violated the law in the performance of their duties with the intention to harm a child, they still can't be prosecuted for it.
The judges can't.
Judges and prosecutors.
They cannot, even if they violated the law with the intention to harm a child, they can't be prosecuted because of protections from the Bar Association.
Well, it's actually absolute immunity in the case of judges is a judicial doctrine that they invented for themselves. For prosecutors, it is statutory. Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to read.
Absolute immunity is a wild concept if you think about it. It basically means somebody's completely above the law in the performance of their duties for the government. You can't hold them responsible. We just had this big debate about whether the president should be held accountable for the law or have immunity, Well, prosecutors and judges have that all day, every day. So, if a prosecutor, for example, in a criminal trial intentionally withheld evidence to convict an innocent man and send him to the death penalty, he can't be prosecuted for that. He has absolute immunity in the performance of his duties.
So
it's a huge flaw in the design of our judiciary.
And judges have the same thing.
Yes, they do. Yeah, that's why they're so powerful.
But how is that? Like I'm kind of baffled that like how is that legal? It's because of the bar association. That's what you're saying.
The bar associations have created laws that insulate lawyers and judges and prosecutors.
Oh.
The rubber hits the road for lawyers in front of judges and prosecutors. So they are the lobby group for those people. And in the federal judiciary, the federal judges just invented this doctrine. They said, "Well, we're just never going to ever convict a judge as long as it was in the performance of his duties. He won't be allowed. You won't be allowed to bring a case against him in federal court." So that's just how it is. Just like there's the domestic relations exception in federal court. So a lot of people have asked me, "Jeff, why don't you go into federal court on civil rights claims or go and get your constitutional rights upheld, in federal court?" Well, the Supreme Court, since the establishment of family courts in the 80s, created a rule called the domestic relations exception. It's not a law, it's not a statute, it's not even a court case. It's just a rule promulgated by the US Supreme Court. And it says that they just won't take any cases out of family court from the states, no matter how egregious they are. They just don't take them.
Wow.
So every time you go out of family court and you say your constitutional rights were violated as a parent, they just dismiss the case. You never can take your case up.
Do you foresee these names of these judges and prosecutors that do this sort of thing becoming public? Like, do you see the public potentially doing more protests similar to yours? And do you see that being effective?
So. I hope they do. One of the things that prosecutors and judges have come to believe is that they should not be influenced by the people, and that the people have no right to know what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
They do not act like public officials, with sunshine laws where we can see what our government's doing. In California, they sealed my case, and there's no law in California that allows them to do that. So the public was not allowed to attend my trial. I can't give you the transcripts. I can't even give you the rulings. All those things are sealed. Even the appellate courts can't get them. So this has all been a secret trial. And judges have come to expect this kind of secrecy as a right of theirs. If you go into a lot of courtrooms, you're not allowed to record the proceedings. Mm-hmm. You can't record them. Why would you not be allowed to record what's happening in a public hearing? If you go to a hearing of the legislature, like I've been to the Texas legislature and the federal legislature many times, you can just whip out your phone and record the debates that are going on the floor. Why can't you do that in a court? The reason is very simple. The judge wants to control the record of what was done in the court. And in family courts, they often lie. I've had transcripts come back where they just put 3 dots and the answer to the question isn't present. Mm-hmm. Jessica Janicek from Coons Fuller would ask me a question. I would reply, and the record would reflect that I didn't give a reply. There's no evidence there. And the court reporter just said, "Well, I couldn't hear what he said." You see how they control the control. That way they can control what's in the record for the appellate court. So judges want to be in absolute control of that. And if you have a tape recorder, you can prove that they're doing felonious acts on the bench by manipulating public records. And so they don't let you do that. Some judges don't even let you take written notes of what's going on. You can't even take notes.
And so if that happens, the judges still can't be sued. They can't go to jail because they're, I forgot the word you said, but they essentially
absolute immunity.
They have absolute immunity, so they can't even be prosecuted for these things.
That is correct.